bus rattled to a stop in front of iron gates that looked like they cost more than her family's entire restaurant. Maya pressed her forehead against the window, staring at the massive stone building beyond. Westman Academy of Music. She'd seen it in photos, but nothing prepared her for how intimidating it looked in person. Her folder of sheet music sat on her lap, held together with clear tape because the zipper had broken months ago. She'd tried to make it look presentable, even covering some of the worn edges with decorative tape her younger brother had donated from his art supplies. It still looked shabby. Everything she owned looked shabby compared to what she was about to walk into. "Last stop Westmont Academy," the bus driver called out, and Maya realized she was the only passenger left. She'd been so lost in her thoughts that she hadn't noticed everyone else getting off at earlier stops. She gathered her things and stepped off the bus, her second-hand flats hitting the pristine sidewalk. The gates were already open and students were flowing through them like a river of designer clothes and confident laughter. Maya took a deep breath and joined the stream. The campus was even more beautiful up close. Perfectly trimmed hedges lined walkways made of actual cobblestone. The main building had columns that reached up 3 stories, and through the tall windows she could see chandeliers. Actual chandeliers in a school. Maya clutched her folder tighter and followed the signs pointing toward the orientation hall. Her acceptance letter had been clear about where to go, what time to arrive, and what to bring. She'd read it so many times the paper had gone soft at the creases. Inside the main building, the floors were marble. Her shoes made small squeaking sounds with each step, and she became painfully aware of how the rubber soles probably left marks. Everyone else seemed to glide across the floor in leather shoes that cost more than her monthly allowance. The orientation hall was already half full when she arrived. Students clustered in groups, clearly already knowing each other from summer programs or family connections. Their conversations floated through the air, filled with mentions of vacation homes in the Hamptons and private instructors who'd studied at Juilliard. Maya found a seat near the back and tried to make herself invisible. She pulled out her phone, pretending to check messages even though there was nothing new. Her mom had texted her that morning with 5 heart emojis and the words, "So proud of you, baby girl." Her dad had sent a thumbs up. That was his version of a long, emotional speech. "Is this seat taken?" Maya looked up to find a girl with perfectly straight blonde hair, gesturing to the empty chair beside her. She wore a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than Maya's entire wardrobe. "No, go ahead," Maya said, moving her bag to make room. The girl sat down and immediately pulled out her phone, joining a video call with someone who appeared to be in a car. "I'm here, Mom. Yes, it's very nice." "Okay, I'll call you later." She hung up and turned to Maya with a practiced smile. "First day jitters?" "Something like that," Maya admitted. "I'm Olivia." "Piano major, you?" "Maya. Also piano." Olivia's eyes flickered down to Maya's taped folder and something changed in her expression. Not quite disgust, but a subtle shift that Maya had learned to recognize over the years. It was the look people gave when they were recalculating their opinion of you. Before either of them could say more, the lights dimmed and the dean walked onto the stage. He was a distinguished man with silver hair and a voice that commanded attention without being loud. "Welcome to Westmont Academy of Music," he began. "You are among the finest young musicians in the country. Some of you come from families with deep musical traditions. Others are first-generation musicians who have earned your place through raw talent and determination. Regardless of your background, you are here because you have something special." Maya felt her chest swell a little at those words. She was here because she was good enough. The scholarship committee had seen something in her audition tape that made them offer her a full ride. That had to mean something. The orientation covered all the basics, from class schedules to practice room assignments to the expectations for performance standards. Maya took notes on her phone, not wanting to miss anything important. This opportunity was too precious to mess up. After the formal presentation ended, students were encouraged to mingle and explore the campus. Maya stood up, planning to find the practice rooms, when a commotion near the front of the hall caught her attention. A tall guy with perfectly styled dark hair was holding court with a group of at least a dozen students. He wore a blazer that looked tailored, and even from a distance Maya could see the glint of an expensive watch on his wrist. His laugh carried across the room, confident and slightly too loud. "That's Ryan Blackwell," Olivia whispered, appearing beside Maya again. "His family basically built the new concert hall. His dad's some tech billionaire. Maya nodded, trying to seem unimpressed even though the name Blackwell did ring a bell. She'd seen it on buildings around the city. He's a violinist, Olivia continued, and apparently pretty good, though some people say his family's donations help his reputation more than his actual playing. Maya was about to respond when the crowd around Ryan shifted, and his eyes landed directly on her. For a moment, they just looked at each other across the room. Then his gaze dropped to her folder and a smirk appeared on his face. He said something to the people around him, and several of them turned to look at Maya. A few laughed. Maya felt heat creeping up her neck, but she held her ground and met his stare evenly. Ryan broke eye contact first, turning back to his admirers with another loud laugh. Maya let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Don't worry about him," Olivia said, though her tone suggested she absolutely thought Maya should worry about him. "He's like that with everyone who doesn't fit into his world." The rest of the day passed in a blur of campus tours and paperwork. Maya got her student ID, picked up her course materials, and found her assigned practice room. It was small but had a decent upright piano and a window that looked out over the gardens. By the time she left campus that evening, her head was spinning with information and her feet ached from walking around all day. She caught the bus home, watching the scenery change from manicured lawns and historic buildings to the busy streets of her neighborhood. The restaurant was packed when she walked through the door. The familiar smell of ginger and garlic welcomed her home. Her mom looked up from where she was taking an order and blew her a kiss. Her dad gave her a quick nod from his position at the wok, his hands moving in the practiced rhythm of someone who'd been cooking the same dishes for 20 years. Maya dropped her bag in the back office and tied on an apron. She had an hour before the dinner rush really hit, which meant she could help out and maybe squeeze in some homework later. "How was it?" her mom asked when she finally had a free moment. "Big," Maya said. "Really big. And fancy. And kind of scary." Her mom squeezed her shoulder. "You belong there just as much as anyone else. Don't forget that." Maya nodded, but she wasn't sure she believed it yet. The image of Ryan's smirk kept replaying in her mind, along with the looks from some of the other students when they saw her worn clothes and taped folder. But then she remembered the dean's words. She was here because she had something special. She just had to prove it, not just to Ryan or the other students, but to herself. That night, after the restaurant closed and her family had gone to bed, Maya sat at the old keyboard in her tiny bedroom. It wasn't a real piano, just a digital keyboard her parents had saved up to buy her when she was 12. The keys stuck sometimes and the sound quality wasn't great, but it was hers. She put on her headphones and began to play, losing herself in the music the way she always did. Out here, in her small room above a Chinese restaurant, she didn't feel like the scholarship kid or the girl with the taped folder. She was just a pianist, and the music was all that mattered. Tomorrow she would go back to Westmont Academy and face whatever came next. But tonight she would play. The first few weeks at Westmont Academy felt like walking through a minefield while everyone else had a map. Maya quickly learned the unwritten rules. Which practice rooms the wealthy kids claimed as their own, which cafeteria tables were off limits, and how to make herself invisible when necessary. Ryan Blackwell seemed to be everywhere. In the hallways between classes, in the practice wing, at the cafe where students grabbed coffee between lessons. And wherever he went, he left a trail of subtle cruelty aimed directly at her. It started small. She'd arrive at her assigned practice room to find someone had left trash inside. Nothing major, just an empty coffee cup or a crumpled napkin, but enough to send a message. She'd sit down in the library only to hear whispers and giggles from nearby tables. One morning, Maya arrived early to claim a good practice room before her afternoon theory class. She'd set her folder on the piano and gone to grab some water from the fountain down the hall. When she came back 3 minutes later, her sheet music was scattered across the floor, and coffee was dripping down the side of the piano bench. Ryan stood near the doorway with two of his friends, looking at his phone as if nothing had happened, but the smirk on his face told her everything she needed to know. "Oops," he said without looking up. "Guess someone had an accident." Maya's hands curled into fists, but she said nothing. She couldn't afford to make enemies, not when she was here on scholarship. One complaint to the administration and her entire future could be at risk. So she cleaned up the mess with paper towels from the bathroom, salvaging what she could of her music. The incident became a story that spread through the school. Some people thought it was funny. Others pretended not to notice. A few looked at her with pity, which somehow felt worse than the mockery. Her roommate, a quiet violinist named Sophie, tried to be supportive in her awkward way. "You should report him," she said one night while they were both studying. "And say what?" Maya replied. "That he spilled coffee near my stuff? That he looks at me funny? They'd think I'm paranoid." Sophie didn't argue because they both knew Maya was right. Ryan's family had donated millions to the school. Maya was here because of someone else's charity. The math wasn't complicated, but Maya had one advantage that Ryan didn't expect. She could play. Really play. Not the technically perfect but emotionally empty performances that some of the wealthy kids produced after years of expensive lessons. Maya had learned piano in a cramped apartment with street noise as her background music, pouring every emotion she couldn't express in words into the keys. Her instructor, Professor Chen, noticed it immediately. He was one of the few faculty members who seemed to genuinely care about talent over pedigree. "You have something rare," he told her after her third lesson. "Most students here can play the notes, but you make people feel something. Don't lose that." Those words became her anchor when everything else felt overwhelming. She might not have designer clothes or family connections, but she had music that mattered. The situation with Ryan escalated in October. The school announced the annual Westmont Gala, a black-tie fundraising event where students performed for donors, alumni, and wealthy patrons. It was the most prestigious performance opportunity of the year, and only a handful of students were chosen to participate. The selection process was competitive. Students had to submit a proposal outlining what they wanted to perform and why they deserved a spot. Maya agonized over her application for days, finally deciding to propose a challenging piece that would showcase both technical skill and emotional depth. When the list was posted, her name was on it, so was Ryan's. The cafeteria was buzzing with conversation the day the performers were announced. Maya was eating lunch alone as usual when she overheard a group at the next table talking about the selections. "I can't believe they picked the scholarship girl," one of them said. "My parents are going to be at that gala. It's embarrassing." "Maybe they need diversity for the brochures," another one replied, and they all laughed. Maya forced herself to keep eating even though the food tasted like cardboard. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her upset. But Ryan wasn't content with whispers and giggles anymore. That afternoon, while Maya was walking to her music history class, he intercepted her in the crowded hallway. His usual entourage surrounded him, blocking her path. "Congratulations on making the gala," he said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "I'm sure they needed to fill a quota." Maya tried to step around him, but one of his friends moved to block her way. "Actually," Ryan continued, his voice dripping with false friendliness, "I wanted to make you a proposal. A friendly wager, if you will." The hallway had gone quiet. Students were stopping to watch, their phones out to capture whatever was about to happen. "I'm not interested," Maya said firmly. "Oh, come on. Don't be boring." Ryan crossed his arms, his expensive watch catching the light. "Here's the deal. We both perform at the gala. If you can actually impress my father, who happens to be one of the school's biggest donors and knows quite a bit about music, I'll publicly apologize to you. I'll admit I was wrong about you. And if I don't?" Maya asked, even though she knew she shouldn't engage. Ryan's smirk widened. "Then you admit you don't belong here. You withdraw from Westmont and stop wasting everyone's time." The crowd reacted with a mix of gasps and excited whispers. Someone behind Maya muttered, "This is crazy." Maya's heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. This was a trap and she knew it. But backing down now would be just as humiliating as accepting. "Your father's opinion decides if I belong at a school I was accepted to on merit?" she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "My father," Ryan said slowly, "literally paid for half the building we're standing in. His opinion matters a lot more than you think. It was cruel and classist and completely unfair. It was also probably true. The Blackwell name was on buildings all over campus. That kind of influence didn't disappear just because it was morally wrong." Maya looked around at the watching faces. Some looked uncomfortable, but no one was stepping in to tell Ryan this was inappropriate. A few were filming on their phones, probably already imagining the social media posts they'd make. Professor Chen's words echoed in her mind. "You have something rare. Don't lose that." She straightened her shoulders and met Ryan's gaze directly. "Fine, I accept your challenge." The crowd erupted in shocked chatter. Ryan's smirk faltered for just a second, as if he hadn't expected her to agree. Excellent, he recovered quickly. May the best pianist win. He swept past her with his entourage, leaving Maya standing in the hallway as students whispered and stared. Her hands were shaking, so she shoved them in her pockets. What had she just done? That evening, Maya couldn't focus on homework. She sat at her desk while Sophie studied across the room, replaying the hallway confrontation in her mind. She'd let Ryan bait her into a situation where she had everything to lose and nothing to gain. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mom. "How's my superstar?" Maya stared at the message for a long time before responding. "Good. Busy with school stuff." She couldn't tell her parents what had happened. They'd worry, or worse, they'd tell her to quit and come home. They'd supported her dream of attending Westmont, but she knew they'd struggled with the decision. Her dad had wanted her to go to community college first, somewhere less expensive and intimidating. Her mom had fought for her to take the scholarship, to grab the opportunity while it existed. If she failed now, it wouldn't just be her own embarrassment. It would prove her dad right, and it would break her mom's heart. "That was pretty intense today," Sophie said quietly from her side of the room. Maya looked up, surprised. Her roommate usually avoided discussing anything controversial. "You saw that?" Maya asked. "Everyone saw it. It's all over the group chats." Sophie paused. "For what it's worth, I think Ryan's a jerk. What he did wasn't fair, but—" Maya prompted because there was clearly more. Sophie hesitated. "But his dad really is super influential, and Ryan's actually a pretty good violinist. His family connections might help him, but he's not completely without talent." It wasn't exactly encouraging, but Maya appreciated the honesty. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the gala, about performing in front of Ryan's father and all those wealthy donors who probably shared his son's opinions about scholarship students. Around 2 a.m, she gave up on sleep and pulled out her tablet. She started researching pieces she could perform, something that would be impressive enough to meet the challenge, but not so difficult that she'd crash and burn. The gala was 6 weeks away. 6 weeks to prepare the performance of her life. 6 weeks to prove she belonged, not just to Ryan and his father, but to everyone who'd ever looked at her taped folder and secondhand clothes and assumed she was less than them. Maya opened her music library and began to plan. If Ryan Blackwell wanted a competition, she'd give him one he'd never forget. The next morning, she walked into Professor Chen's office hours and told him everything. He listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious as she explained the challenge. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "What Ryan did was inappropriate and cruel. You know that, right?" "Yes." "And you know you don't actually have to withdraw from school no matter what happens at the gala?" "That's not how this works, I know," Maya said. "But if I back down now, I'll never stop being the scholarship girl who couldn't handle the pressure. At least this way I control the narrative." Professor Chen studied her carefully. "What do you want to perform?" Maya took a deep breath. "I want to play something that matters, something that shows what music is supposed to be about." A small smile crossed Professor Chen's face. "Then let's get to work." The practice room became Maya's second home. Every spare moment between classes, every evening after homework, every weekend morning when most students were still sleeping off parties she'd never been invited to, she was at the piano. Professor Chen had helped her choose a piece that terrified her, Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. It was ambitious, maybe too ambitious, but it was also the kind of music that could make people stop breathing when played right. The kind of music that didn't just showcase technical skill but demanded something deeper. "This piece requires you to be vulnerable," Professor Chen had told her. "It's not about perfect notes. It's about truth. Can you do that in front of an audience that might not want to hear what you have to say?" The question haunted Maya as she practiced. Could she be vulnerable in front of people who'd already decided she didn't belong? Could she pour her heart into music for an audience that included Ryan Blackwell and his billionaire father? She didn't know, but she had to try. The first week of practice was brutal. Her fingers stumbled over passages that should have been straightforward. The emotion she needed to channel felt blocked, trapped behind walls she'd built to survive in this hostile environment. Professor Chen sat through her practice sessions, occasionally stopping her to work on a specific section. "You're playing it correctly," he said during one particularly frustrating afternoon, "but you're not playing it honestly." "What are you afraid of?" Maya's hands hovered over the keys. I'm afraid of giving them more ammunition. If I pour everything into this and fail, they win. And if you hold back, you've already lost, Professor Chen replied gently. The only way this works is if you stop playing for them and start playing for yourself. It was easier said than done. Around campus, word of the challenge had spread like wildfire. Maya couldn't walk through the halls without feeling eyes on her. Some students were supportive in their quiet way, offering encouraging smiles or small waves. But many others had chosen Ryan's side, treating Maya like she was the problem for having the audacity to accept his challenge. The online chatter was worse. Someone had created a poll asking who would win at the gala. Ryan was leading by a significant margin. The comment section was filled with predictions about how badly Maya would embarrass herself. Sophie tried to get Maya to stop checking her phone. You're just torturing yourself, she said one evening when she caught Maya scrolling through yet another thread about the upcoming performance. I need to know what I'm walking into, Maya replied. But she knew Sophie was right. The constant negativity was eating away at her confidence. The second week, Maya hit a wall. She'd been practicing for hours every day, and her progress had stalled. The technical passages were coming together, but the emotional core of the piece remained elusive. She could play the notes, but she couldn't make them sing. Frustrated and exhausted, she called her mom during a break between classes. I don't know if I can do this, Maya admitted, her voice cracking. Maybe I made a mistake accepting his challenge. Her mom was quiet for a moment. Maya could hear the sounds of the restaurant in the background, the familiar clatter of plates and murmur of customers. Do you remember your first recital? Her mom finally asked. Maya did. She'd been 11 years old, performing in a community center for an audience of maybe 30 people. She'd been so nervous she'd almost thrown up beforehand. You were so scared, her mom continued, but the moment you started playing, everything else disappeared. You told me later that you forgot anyone was watching. It was just you and the music. This is different, Maya said. The stakes are higher. The stakes are always high when you're doing something that matters. But the music hasn't changed. You have to find that place again, where it's just you and the piano. After they hung up, Maya sat in an empty classroom for a while, thinking about what her mom had said. She'd gotten so caught up in proving herself to Ryan and his father that she'd forgotten why she played in the first place. That evening, instead of going to the practice rooms, Maya went for a walk around campus. It was late October, and the leaves were turning brilliant shades of orange and gold. The air had that crisp quality that made everything feel sharper, more alive. She found herself at the edge of campus, looking out over the city below. Somewhere down there was her family's restaurant, her parents working the dinner rush, her little brother doing homework at the corner table. They'd sacrificed so much to help her get here, working long hours to make sure she could focus on her music. This wasn't about Ryan. It had never been about Ryan. This was about honoring the people who'd believed in her. When she didn't believe in herself, something shifted inside her that night. She couldn't control what Ryan or his father or anyone else thought about her, but she could control what she brought to that piano. She could choose to be brave enough to be vulnerable, to play music that mattered even if people mocked her for trying. The third week, the breakthrough came. Maya was working through a particularly difficult passage, one that had been giving her trouble since the beginning. She'd been approaching it as a technical challenge, trying to get her fingers to move fast enough and precisely enough. But suddenly she understood what Professor Chen had been trying to tell her. This wasn't about speed or precision. It was about longing, about reaching for something just beyond your grasp. Once she stopped trying to conquer the passage and started trying to express it, her fingers found their way. There, Professor Chen said from his chair in the corner. That's it. That's what I've been waiting to hear. Maya played the passage again, and this time it felt different. Not easier exactly, but more honest, more real. From that point forward, the piece started to come together. The technical challenges didn't disappear, but they became secondary to the emotional journey of the music. Maya began to understand each movement not as a collection of notes, but as a story she was telling. She still practiced for hours every day, but now the practice felt different. She wasn't just drilling passages until her fingers ached. She was learning to speak a language that went deeper than words. Other students noticed the change. Some of the musicians who'd been dismissive before started lingering near her practice room, listening through the door. A few even offered words of encouragement. I heard you practicing yesterday, a cellist named Alex told her in the hallway. That's some serious stuff you're working on. Thanks, Maya said, surprised by the compliment. For what it's worth, I think Ryan's challenge was complete garbage. But I'm glad you're doing it anyway. Someone needs to show him that money isn't everything. It was a small moment, but it meant something. Maya wasn't completely alone in this. Ryan, meanwhile, had been noticeably quiet. He still gave her cold looks in the hallways, but he'd stopped with the overt harassment. Maya wondered if someone had talked to him, or if he was just confident enough in his upcoming victory that he didn't feel the need to keep attacking her. Either way, she was grateful for the space to focus on her preparation. The fourth week brought a new challenge. The gala organizers needed to do technical rehearsals in the actual performance hall. Each performer would get one 30-minute slot to practice with the acoustics and test the piano. Maya's time slot was scheduled for Tuesday evening. She arrived at the concert hall 15 minutes early, her stomach churning with nerves. She'd practiced in regular rooms, but this was different. This was the actual stage where she'd perform in less than 2 weeks. The hall was massive, with rows of plush red seats stretching back into the darkness. The stage lights were harsh and hot. The grand piano sat center stage, gleaming black under the spotlights. A tech crew member showed her where to stand and explained how the lighting would work during the actual performance. Then they left her alone with the piano. Maya sat down at the bench and immediately felt overwhelmed. The space was so much bigger than any practice room. The piano was so much nicer than anything she'd played on before. Every small sound echoed through the empty hall. She put her hands on the keys and started to play, but it came out tentative and small. The acoustics of the hall swallowed her playing, making it sound weak and uncertain. Panic started to creep in. This was what Ryan's father would hear. This was what all those wealthy donors would experience. She sounded like exactly what they expected. A scholarship student out of her depth. Maya stopped playing and put her head in her hands. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe she didn't belong here. The hall makes everyone sound small at first. Maya looked up to find Professor Chen walking down the aisle toward the stage. She hadn't known he'd be there. You have to play bigger, he continued, climbing the stairs to join her on stage. Not louder, necessarily bigger. Fill the space with your intention, not just your sound. He sat down at the piano and played a simple scale. Even that basic exercise seemed to expand and fill the hall when he played it. Then he gestured for Maya to try. She played the same scale, trying to capture what he'd done. It was better, but still not quite right. They worked together for the entire 30 minutes, with Professor Chen helping her understand how to project in the larger space, without losing the intimacy and emotion of the piece. By the end of the session, Maya was starting to feel like she could handle the acoustics. You're going to be fine, Professor Chen said as they packed up. Better than fine, actually. But Maya? She looked at him. Remember, you're not trying to prove anything to them. You're sharing something beautiful. That's all music ever is. The final week before the gala passed in a blur. Maya fine-tuned her performance, working on the smallest details until she could play the entire piece from memory with her eyes closed. She practiced her entrance, her bow, even what she'd do with her hands when she finished playing. Her family came to visit that weekend, bringing containers of her favorite food and filling her dorm room with the familiar sense of home. Her little brother wanted to hear her play, so they snuck into a practice room and she performed the piece for him. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That was really cool, Maya. You made me feel stuff." Coming from a 13-year-old boy, it was the highest compliment possible. The night before the gala, Maya couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, running through the piece in her mind, feeling the shape of each phrase. Sophie had already wished her good luck and gone to sleep, her quiet snoring filling the dark room. Maya thought about everything that had led to this moment. The years of practice in her cramped bedroom, her parents' sacrifices, the scholarship that had made all of this possible. She thought about Ryan's smirk, the whispered comments, the coffee-stained sheet music. Tomorrow she would walk onto that stage in front of hundreds of people who had already decided what she was worth. Tomorrow she would sit at that piano and pour her entire heart into music that most of them probably wouldn't appreciate. But she would do it anyway. Because the music mattered, even if they didn't think she did. She finally fell asleep around 3 in the morning, her hands unconsciously moving through the fingerings of her piece even in her dreams. The morning of the gala, Maya woke up with her heart already racing. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, promising a clear November evening. Perfect weather for an event that could either validate everything she'd worked for or confirm everyone's worst assumptions about her. Sophie was already awake, sitting at her desk with a cup of tea. "Big day," she said softly. "How are you feeling?" "Terrified," Maya admitted. "But ready, I think. You're going to be amazing." Maya wished she felt as confident as Sophie sounded. She spent the morning trying to keep busy without exhausting herself. A light breakfast, even though her stomach was too nervous to want food. A walk around campus to clear her head. Some gentle stretching to keep her hands and shoulders loose. Her mom texted around noon. "We're on the road. Can't wait to see you shine tonight." Maya's entire family was driving up for the gala. It was a 3-hour trip, and they were closing the restaurant early to make it. The thought of them sitting in that audience, watching her perform in front of all those wealthy people, made Maya's anxiety spike even higher. By afternoon, she couldn't avoid it anymore. She had to start getting ready. The dress had been a challenge. The gala had a strict black tie dress code, and Maya didn't own anything that qualified. She'd been prepared to wear the simple black dress from orientation until Olivia, of all people, had surprised her. "I have something that might work," Olivia had said a few days earlier, appearing at Maya's dorm room with a garment bag. "It's from last year's gala. I'm not using it anymore, and I think we're about the same size." The dress was deep blue, elegant without being too flashy. It fit Maya almost perfectly with just a few safety pins strategically placed. "Why are you helping me?" Maya had asked, genuinely confused. Olivia had shrugged uncomfortably. "Because Ryan's challenge was cruel, and because you're actually good. I heard you practicing last week. You deserve to have one less thing to worry about." Now, Maya carefully put on the borrowed dress and looked at herself in the mirror. She looked different, older somehow, like someone who might actually belong on that stage. Sophie helped her with her hair, pulling it back into a simple but sophisticated style. "You look beautiful," she said. "Seriously, Ryan's going to be so embarrassed when you blow everyone away." Maya tried to smile, but her nerves were making it difficult to do anything but focus on the upcoming performance. The gala started at 7. Performers needed to arrive by 5:30 for final preparations. Maya left the dorm at 5, giving herself plenty of time to get to the concert hall. Campus looked different in the early evening light. Students were heading to dinner or the library, going about their normal Friday routines. Maya felt like she was walking towards something that would change everything, while the world around her just kept spinning normally. The concert hall was already buzzing with activity when she arrived. Crew members were doing last-minute technical checks. Catering staff were setting up refreshments in the lobby. Other performers were arriving, dressed in their formal wear and carrying instruments. Maya found her way backstage, following the signs to the performers' waiting area. The room was filled with nervous energy. Some students were doing vocal warm-ups or fingering through their pieces in the air. Others sat quietly, eyes closed, mentally preparing. Ryan was there, looking infuriatingly calm in an expensive tuxedo. He saw Maya and raised his eyebrows, letting his gaze travel from her borrowed dress to her face. "Nice dress," he said. There might have been a compliment hidden in there, but his tone made it unclear. "Thanks," Maya replied, refusing to engage further. She found a quiet corner and sat down, trying to center herself. Professor Chen had arranged for her to perform near the end of the program, which meant she'd have to wait through several other performances first. The waiting might be worse than the actual playing. At 6:30, the doors opened and the audience started filing in. Maya could hear the murmur of voices from backstage, the sounds of wealthy donors and alumni greeting each other. Somewhere in that crowd were her parents and her brother, probably feeling as out of place as she did. At 6:45, a stage manager gathered all the performers for final instructions. They'd go in the order listed in the program. Ryan was performing fourth. Maya was second to last. The lights in the house dimmed, and Dean Roberts walked onto the stage to welcoming applause. Maya watched from the wings as he gave his opening remarks, thanking donors and celebrating the students' achievements. Then the first performer, a soprano, took the stage. Her voice was technically perfect, hitting every note with precision, but Maya found herself thinking of Professor Chen's words about playing honestly versus playing correctly. The performance was impressive but somehow cold. The second performer was a cellist who played with more emotion, but struggled with some of the technical passages. The third was a jazz pianist who got the audience engaged with a lively piece that had people tapping their feet. Then it was Ryan's turn. Maya watched from the wings as he walked confidently onto the stage. He carried his violin like it was an extension of his body, expensive and perfectly maintained. The audience applauded enthusiastically. She caught glimpses of his father in the front row, a distinguished man with sharp features and an expression that revealed nothing. Ryan performed a Paganini caprice, chosen specifically to showcase technical virtuosity, and she had to admit, as much as she disliked him, he was good. His fingers flew across the strings, hitting every impossible note. The performance was flashy and impressive, exactly what you'd expect from someone who'd had the best teachers money could buy. The audience loved it. They gave him a standing ovation, his father included. Ryan bowed deeply, that familiar smirk on his face, before walking off stage. As he passed Maya in the wings, he leaned close and whispered, "Good luck following that." 3 more performers went after Ryan. Each one was talented in their own way, but Maya barely registered their performances. Her mind was already on the stage, on the piano that waited for her, on the piece she'd been living with for the past 6 weeks. Finally, the stage manager touched her shoulder. "You're up next." Maya took a deep breath and walked to the edge of the stage. From here, she could see the audience, hundreds of faces in formal wear, wine glasses catching the light. She found her family in the crowd. Her mom had tears in her eyes already, and the performance hadn't even started. Her dad gave her a firm nod. Her brother waved enthusiastically until their mom pulled his hand down. The performer before her finished and walked off stage. There was a brief pause while the crew adjusted the lighting. Then Dean Roberts returned to the microphone. "Our next performer is Maya Chen, a first-year student here on a full scholarship. She'll be playing an excerpt from Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. The applause was polite but noticeably less enthusiastic than it had been for Ryan. Maya walked onto the stage, her borrowed dress swishing softly against her legs. The stage lights were even hotter than she remembered from rehearsal. She sat down at the piano and adjusted the bench, taking her time even though her hands were shaking. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her, judging her dress, her posture, her worthiness to be on this stage. Maya placed her hands on the keys and closed her eyes for just a moment. She thought about her mom's voice on the phone, telling her to find the place where it was just her and the music. She thought about her grandmother in Shanghai, who'd been a pianist before history took that dream away from her. She thought about every hour she'd spent in that practice room, learning not just to play the notes but to mean them. When she opened her eyes, the audience had faded. There was just her and the piano and the music that had been living inside her for weeks, waiting to be released. She began to play. The opening chords of the Rachmaninoff were soft, almost tentative, like a question being asked in the darkness. Maya's fingers moved across the keys with a gentleness that drew the audience in, making them lean forward to hear. Then the music began to build. The melody emerged, beautiful and aching, full of longing for something just out of reach. Maya's hands moved with increasing confidence, the technical passages flowing naturally because she wasn't thinking about them anymore. She was just feeling. The music swelled and crashed like waves against rocks. It was passionate and vulnerable and completely honest. Every emotion she'd been holding back poured into the piano. The frustration of being judged by her clothes instead of her talent. The loneliness of being an outsider in a world that didn't want her. The fierce determination to prove that she belonged not to them, but to herself. But there was also beauty in the music, joy and hope and the pure love of playing that had drawn her to piano in the first place. The memory of her first recital, when it was just her and the music and nothing else mattered. The pride in her mother's voice, the sacrifices her family had made so she could chase this impossible dream. Maya was no longer performing for the audience. She was having a conversation with the piano, and they were speaking a language that went deeper than words. The performance flew by and lasted forever all at once. She was completely lost in the music, unaware of time passing, unaware of anything, except the keys beneath her fingers and the emotions pouring out of her. When she struck the final chord, letting it ring out into the silence of the hall, Maya felt exhausted and exhilarated and completely empty in the best possible way. She'd given everything she had to give. For 3 heartbeats, The hall was completely silent. Then someone in the front row stood up. It was Ryan's father, Thomas Blackwell, the billionaire whose opinion was supposed to determine whether she belonged. He was standing, applauding, his face showing an emotion that Maya couldn't quite identify. Respect? Surprise? Admiration? And then the rest of the audience was standing too, everyone on their feet, applause washing over the stage like thunder. Maya saw her mother openly crying, her father with his hand over his heart, her brother jumping up and down. She saw Professor Chen in the wings nodding at her with a satisfied smile. She saw other students, some of whom had mocked her weeks ago, clapping enthusiastically. And she saw Ryan, still sitting backstage where he'd been watching, his face pale, his expression unreadable. Maya stood and bowed, her legs shaky, her eyes stinging with unshed tears. The applause continued, wave after wave of it, more than they'd given anyone else that night. She'd done it. Not perfectly, maybe, but honestly. And that had been enough. Maya walked off stage in a daze, the applause still ringing in her ears. Her legs felt weak, her hands were trembling, and she wasn't entirely sure she was breathing correctly. The past 15 minutes felt both completely real and entirely dreamlike. Professor Chen was waiting for her in the wings, and for the first time since she'd known him, his professional composure cracked into a genuine smile. That, he said simply, was extraordinary. Before Maya could respond, she was enveloped in a hug from Sophie, who'd apparently snuck backstage during the performance. "Oh my God, Maya, everyone was crying. Did you see them?" The final performer, a violist, gave Maya a quick thumbs up before heading onto the stage. Maya tried to focus on being respectful of their performance, but her mind was still spinning from what had just happened. The rest of the gala passed in a blur. After the last performance, there was a reception in the lobby where performers mingled with donors and guests. Maya had been dreading this part, the forced small talk with wealthy people who'd probably still see her as the scholarship student regardless of how well she'd played. But the moment she stepped into the lobby, still in her borrowed dress, she was swarmed. Her family reached her first. Her mother was full-on crying now, not even trying to hide it. Her father, who rarely showed emotion, pulled her into a tight hug and whispered, "Your grandmother would be so proud." That's when Maya's own tears finally came. Her little brother, looking uncomfortable with all the emotion, punched her arm lightly and said, "That was actually really cool, better than video games." From him, it was the highest praise imaginable. Other people approached after her family stepped back. Alumni Maya had never met congratulated her. A woman who introduced herself as a concert pianist told her it was one of the most moving performances she'd heard from a student. A couple who owned a music venue in the city asked if she'd be interested in performing there sometime. Through it all, Maya kept looking for two people, Ryan and his father. She spotted Ryan first, standing by the refreshment table with a group of his usual friends. He was holding a glass of champagne that he probably wasn't supposed to have, and he looked deeply uncomfortable. When their eyes met across the room, he quickly looked away. Then she saw Thomas Blackwell making his way through the crowd toward her. He was tall like his son, with the same sharp features but weathered by years and experience. People parted to let him through, clearly aware of his importance. Maya's heart started racing again. This was it, the moment the entire challenge had been building toward. What would he say? Thomas reached her and extended his hand. Maya shook it, noting that his grip was firm but not aggressive. "Miss Chen," he said, his voice measured and precise. "That was a remarkable performance." "Thank you, sir," Maya managed to say. "I've attended hundreds of concerts," Thomas continued. "I've heard some of the world's greatest pianists, and what you did tonight reminded me of something I'd almost forgotten." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Music isn't about perfection, it's about truth. You played with more honesty in 15 minutes than I've heard in years of technically flawless performances." Maya didn't know what to say. This was not what she'd expected from the man who'd raised Ryan. "My son made a foolish wager with you," Thomas said, his expression hardening slightly. "A wager that never should have happened. You don't need my approval or anyone else's to belong at this institution. Your talent speaks for itself. He glanced over at where Ryan was standing, and something unspoken passed between father and son. Ryan set down his glass and walked over, looking like he was approaching his own execution. Maya, Ryan said, and it was the first time he'd ever used her first name. I owe you an apology. Actually, I owe you about 100 apologies, but I'll start with one. The conversations around them had quieted. People were watching, phones were probably recording. This was going to be all over social media by tomorrow. What I did was wrong, Ryan continued, clearly uncomfortable but pushing through. The challenge, the comments, the way I treated you from day one, it was all wrong. I was an arrogant jerk who thought where someone came from mattered more than what they could do. You proved me wrong in the best possible way. There was a long moment of silence. Maya could feel everyone waiting for her response. Part of her wanted to tell him exactly what she thought of him, to make him feel as small as he'd made her feel for weeks. But she was tired of anger. She was tired of proving herself. And honestly, the best revenge was the performance she'd just given. Apology accepted, Maya said simply. Ryan looked surprised, like he'd expected her to make him suffer more. His father nodded approvingly. There's something else, Thomas said. I'd like to discuss establishing a mentorship with you. I may have made my fortune in technology, but music has always been my passion. I'd like to help support your development as an artist, if you're interested. No strings attached, no obligations. Maya's mother, who'd been hovering nearby trying not to eavesdrop too obviously, made a small sound of surprise. Professor Chen, also within earshot, gave Maya an encouraging nod. I'd like that, Maya said carefully. Thank you. After Thomas and Ryan moved on, Maya was once again surrounded by well-wishers. But she noticed something had changed. People weren't just being polite anymore. They were genuinely interested in her, asking about her background, her training, her plans for the future. Olivia appeared at some point with a glass of sparkling cider. You earned this, she said. That was incredible. I'm sorry I was weird when we first met. I think I was trying to figure out where you fit in the social hierarchy, which is stupid. Because who cares? Thanks, Maya said, accepting the drink. And thanks for the dress. I couldn't have done this without it. Keep it, Olivia said. It looks better on you anyway. The reception lasted another hour, and Maya spent most of it talking to people, accepting congratulations, and trying to process everything that had happened. Her feet hurt from the borrowed heels she was wearing, and she was emotionally exhausted. But she also felt lighter than she had in weeks. When the event finally ended, Maya's family offered to take her out for a late dinner, but she was too drained. They understood, hugging her goodbye and promising to call tomorrow. Her brother whispered that he'd recorded her performance on his phone, and her mom cried again while saying goodbye. Back in her dorm room, Sophie was already asleep. Maya carefully hung up the borrowed dress and changed into her pajamas. She sat on her bed, finally alone with her thoughts. Her phone was blowing up with messages, texts from classmates she'd barely spoken to, social media notifications from people sharing videos of her performance, a message from Professor Chen telling her to come by his office Monday morning. But the message that made her smile came from her mom. You did it, baby girl. You showed them what we always knew. So proud of you. Love you to the moon and back.